Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay. You ready?
You ready?
I'm ready.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, don't use that on the podcast, man.
Welcome in, everyone. I'm Dr. Bob.
Okay. I got to put that on the thing.
No, but seriously, I was just listening to pneumococcal episode, and I cannot believe you kept a part in there where you were like clearing your throat, and then you're like, oh, that's okay, we'll edit this out, and then but it's still in there. I'm thinking, like, why would you leave that in there? You're like,
well, it's real. I mean, it's real life.
Really unnecessary.
I mean, no. No, I think
who wants to hear
no. The
that?
listeners want to know, like, what is
Do
it
they?
like to sit in the room with Dr. Bob and listen to him?
Are you that famous?
podcast?
Really?
Yeah.
Are you that famous?
People want
They
to
just wanna
know. Come on, everyone. Yeah, show me like your blue hearts or pink stars on the screen if,
Blue
if you want to
hearts.
know. Oh wait,
Blue
we're not.
thumbs up.
We're not Facebooking
Red
live
heart.
this time, so there's no instant feedback.
You're
Anyway,
like in one of those like tabloid magazines, like Dr. Bob is just like us. He clears his throat when he eats snacks. He takes out the trash. Have you seen those magazines? Like,
No, I haven't.
They'll have like celebrities like taking out their trash. They'll be like, stars are just like us.
Wow. Okay.
It's so silly how celebrity culture has gotten.
Someday I might be a star. We'll see.
Oh, lordy, lordy.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start the podcast for real now.
go.
Right? Okay.
Ready? Go.
When you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome in, everybody, to the vaccine conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob. We're very happy to be back. It's been a couple of weeks for us, I think, hasn't it?
Has it again?
Yeah,
Gosh.
I think. Yeah. Yeah, although I don't know, you guys probably don't really even know when we record these things, but they're...
Well, also, I feel like there's so much happening, like on our own Facebook pages and posting on the Media Education group, that like it feels like the constant sources of information are consistent. So even if we aren't, here for a couple weeks before we're recording, there's still so much happening and we're still interacting with so many people about all these issues that it kind of feels like it's ongoing, and we're not ever stopping.
Right.
There's too much. I mean, gosh,
Right.
this last several months has just been very story heavy.
I feel like we could almost do a little news story every single day, but
I
we're
know.
not going to drive in here every single day to do
Yeah,
this.
you're right about that.
Hey, good news.
What?
Exciting news. And everyone can thank Melissa for doing this work. We have posted resources to our podcasts. You guys asked us to, is there a way we can, have links to every single study we talk about and in every single episode? And I kind of thought it was too much work, but Melissa went and did the first 10 episodes.
First 10 episodes, I'll do a little bit at a time because it's hard to go back through the notes. If anyone's seen my huge white binder full of information, it's like I print out studies. I don't keep them accessible as links because I like to read them hard copies, and that's where I go through. I make notes. And so after that, once we're done, I put it in the binder and it's released, right? But then I get all these messages like, oh, do you happen to have your source list?
Yeah, where's that
for this?
study? What was that study? Yeah.
And even though we mention them and we give the full title, like
and we tell you to pause the podcast and go find the study.
by we, you mean you.
Yeah. Does anyone do that, I wonder? Send me a comment. Let me know.
Hopefully not when they're driving or something listening to this. That's not smart.
Right.
But yeah,
exactly.
so there's a page on immunityeducationgroup.org website where you click on podcast.
Correct.
Listen to our podcast. And if you scroll down on that page, you will see the links for the first 10 episodes. And we'll continue to update that and add as we go. And
you can also find it on our Facebook page, Immunity Education Group. The blog, or the podcast blog is, the podcast post is pinned to the top of our Facebook page.
Okay, so in other words, the Immunity Education Group Facebook page pinned post.
Yes, there you go.
That's all you had to say.
So if you go there, then we have put all the links in that comment to this. And the third place you can find it is Matt is now putting each of these links. Matt,
one link, right? One link to the sources.
Yeah. Matt is putting a tiny URL link to this resource page on the intro information for each podcast
episode. Yeah, for each episode.
Like if you're on your phone and you have your I don't know, like you're listening to your podcast and you scroll down, you see our intro. It says what the podcast is about. Then you see the bottom of that, you will see a tiny URL link, and that will take you straight to our resource page. So you can actually do this now on your.
So essentially, we're doing a lot more extra work for you to make it easier to access. And the reason I think that's important is because I 100% stand by every single thing that we've said on this podcast as being completely true, verifiable, sourced, cited, always coming from something official outside of if we say it's our opinion on something. But outside of that, like everything has a place that's been from, is a documented source. And that's important because when we do get the 1-star reviews from certain people that might say misinformation, that's implying that what we're saying here is not true or factual or accurate. And the reality is everything that we're saying is true. Now, it might not match up to the narrative that we've been told. And if that's what, defines it as misinformation, then that's just erroneous in itself.
Right.
But we're not giving misinformation. Nothing that nothing that we're saying is a manipulation of the truth, or we're not handwriting in and filling in blanks for things that aren't there. We're literally reporting essentially the information that we've come across.
Yeah, and I would say everything that's labeled as misinformation is actually, to me, is true information. It's just the establishment disagrees with someone's conclusions or someone's maybe advice that they're giving based on the data. That's what the mainstream people are disagreeing with. And that's really what to them is misinformation. But you're right, all the data we use is the same data they use. And we just maybe come to different conclusions or are willing to give you more information. They should call it more information.
Instead of I don't think that they're disagreeing with what we're saying. I actually think they just don't want everyone else to know what we're saying. There's something very different there. Yeah. Like they have to agree with it because it's a fact.
They're disagreeing because they're saying, even though you're right about all those risks, everyone still needs to vaccinate. And because you guys, some of you are not agreeing to vaccinate, we have the right to mandate them. That to me, that's, so I think they kind of are disagreeing with us in that respect.
But I think they're disagreeing with our desire for transparency.
Yeah,
they're disagreeing with the fact that we want the whole story told to everyone.
Yeah, because if everyone hears the whole story, they're less compliant.
They can't disagree with the fact that pertussis is also spread by vaccinated people. They can't disagree with that.
Right.
That's a fact. They have to agree with it because it's a fact. They disagree with the fact that we are sharing that information because it could potentially lead to somebody in their mind, not complying. So they're disagreeing with us not complying and perhaps, awakening other people to the fact that there is some shady stuff going on. And so I don't feel like, so they're not disagreeing with the information, essentially. I think they're just disagreeing with the fact that this could lead somebody on a path of non-compliance.
Right.
And that doesn't go along with what their goal is.
Exactly.
But the facts still remain to be facts.
Yep.
#facts.
Yeah. All right.
But you wanted to talk about pertussis.
Oh yeah. Well, so I guess I just want to give a really brief update about pertussis because there are 3 news items going around regarding pertussis right now, and I think the first news item was a study put out by Dr. Cherry from UCLA, and this was put out about a month ago. And the study, we'll give you the link now, so we don't have to read the study title, but I will anyway. It's the 112-year odyssey of pertussis and pertussis vaccines, mistakes made and implications for the future. And Dr. Cherry is I think if anyone had to pick the most respected pediatric infectious disease expert in the nation, I think all doctors would agree it's Dr. Cherry. He is by far the most experienced, very well respected, very well published.
And you said he's from
UCLA.
Oh,
yeah. How
funny is that? Someone here also went to UCLA.
I know, that's amazing. So I'm not going to read you the whole abstract, but basically he says the original vaccine we used to use, the whole cell, really helped us reduce pertussis. And when we took almost all the pertussis ingredients out of that vaccine and made it the acellular vaccine, it's not working nearly as well. But what he's saying is it actually will make you more susceptible to catching pertussis or whooping cough for the entire rest of your life. And that's how he concludes the abstract. He says, all children who were given the DTaP vaccines will be more susceptible to pertussis throughout their lifetimes. And there's no easy way to decrease this increased lifetime susceptibility. He says this happens because of something called linked epitope suppression. Linked epitope suppression. I had to call Hector and ask him what that even means. And I had to ask a few other people what that means. And essentially, and I will admit I still don't understand it, but I'm going to try to explain it in 2 sentences. Our immune system, when we get the acellular vaccine, and our immune system reacts to the components of that acellular vaccine, our immune system creates creates an effect that somehow, if we ever see the real germ later, we will not recognize that germ as well. Like our own immune system is suppressing and covering up certain parts of that germ, so our immune system won't see it. And so it'll infect us even more.
So
we won't launch a natural immune response.
That humoral immunity, that idea of memory, antibody memory immunity is not working
right. Yeah,
well.
I forget exactly how it's not working well.
Because if you're not recognizing it again when it comes into contact, then the humoral immunity, which is what vaccines are supposed to be inducing, to so that when the germ comes again, your body goes, oh, we've seen this before, and let's mount our attack before it happens. But that's not happening.
Exactly.
It's not allowing that.
Yeah, and it's pretty complicated. But the end result is, yeah, for a brief period of time, this vaccine might give you some immune response if you catch the germs. But as the vaccine wears off and you lose those vaccine antibodies, then the whole rest of your immune system that's supposed to hopefully react to disease later will be impaired. And 10 years later, 20 years later, and he says there's no way to fix that.
Right.
We've permanently made everybody more susceptible to this
with 6 doses
disease.
by the time you're 12.
Exactly.
But is this not true of the whole cell?
Right. So I think when you got the whole cell vaccine, you just generated such a more global immune response and a better immune response that I think it did not have that effect. And so what I worry about is they might be using this. Well, I'll continue on to I guess the next story. The next part of this story or news on whooping cough is mutating. And there's a study put out by the CDC called Genomic Survey of Bordetella pertussis Diversity, United States, 2000 to 2013. The CDC basically took a bunch of whooping cough samples from all over the country over 13 years, and they examined the genetics. And they basically found that the new whooping cough germs, in fact, they found the majority of the whooping cough germs now are deficient in the pertactin protein. The whooping cough germ has a lot of protein surrounding it, and the pertactin protein is one of the things that the vaccine attacks and gives you immunity to. So now pertussis germs aren't making pertactin protein to cover themselves. So now when we get the vaccine and the vaccine creates antibodies against pertussis protein, pertussis germs don't have it anymore, so the immune system isn't working against that part of the pertussis germs. Does that make sense?
It does.
Make sense? So
it makes amazing. A lot of sense, right. Dr. Bob.
So and the study says that's a likely cause of the increase and the waning increase of disease and the waning protection. And we know when we use like antibiotics and we pressure germs with antibiotics, germs mutate. Right. So antibiotics no longer work. And we've seen other mutating germs from vaccines. So it's possible that the presence of our species having antibodies against pertactin is stimulating the pertussis germs to stop making pertactin, so the vaccine won't work as well. And I love this. I mean, you can imagine what the CDC is going to recommend despite this defect, and despite the Dr. Cherry found. Doses, right? The Dr. Cherry found this might actually be making you more susceptible the rest of your life. They say, although such recent genetic changes may be ascribed to vaccine-driven immune selection, acellular pertussis vaccines remain effective.
So even though they're mutating and even though the vaccine's not working, the vaccines still are effective.
Exactly. Then they say, and the proportion of isolates that don't have the pertactin proteins that started increasing rapidly beginning in 2010. I don't know why it took so long for the germ to mutate, but
acellular vaccine has been used since 1997.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Right. So
no, exactly 1997, sir. I have done my research.
Yes, I am not. I figure you weren't a doctor back then, so I thought maybe
but I am one
know.
now.
Yes.
So.
But that's very concerning. And then we've seen a recent effect of this. Why don't you talk about
it's
what's
not
recently
even
happened?
Recent, though. I mean, we look at when we were talking about the 2015 legislation. California had just had a large outbreak in 2014, and we looked at the state data and found out that really over 90% of the pediatric cases in California were already vaccinated. And I looked back at pertussis from 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And in every single one of those years in California's data, there were at least 92 to 95% vaccine rates for every single pertussis outbreak, even if it was thousands of cases. Like, we're not talking just 10 cases, but in some cases, 9,000 cases.
Right.
Or, close to 10,000 cases. And then recently, I posted about this at Harvard Westlake, which is kind of like a preparatory high school. They have 2 campuses in LA County, and they have a 98.6% vaccine rate coverage rate. So they have only 18 students out of 1,600 that have medical exemptions. At first, there was an outbreak with 30 cases. Out of the 30 cases, 30 out of 30 were vaccinated. None of the 18 with whooping cough. Yeah, vaccinated for whooping cough, and the outbreak is pertussis, whooping cough. And so then it spread to 50 cases. And then there were an additional 40 cases in the county. So out of all of LA County, this outbreak was 90 cases, and 90 out of 90 of them are vaccinated.
Wow.
Like literally, so this is even higher than the 90%. We're talking about 100% of this outbreak is vaccinated. The 18 students with medical exemptions still are unaffected by pertussis when all of these other cases have come up. And so this was covered in the LA Times. And they said something that experts have been noticing is that immunity wanes quickly. So they start talking about immunity wanes. They even said waning immunity, in a separate quote from doctor, waning immunity is a widely recognized truth. And what I think is so funny about that is if you ever talk about waning immunity in any of these social media conversations regarding vaccine mandates, people will completely disagree with you. They will say that's not true. Vaccine immunity is forever. Or they might say, well, the pertussis doesn't last that long, but they don't realize how little protection that you get. And so what they said about the booster, so 98% of LA County for 7th grade has the booster for Tdap. And what they said about that booster is only 80% of those kids that get it will get any protection. So 20% get nothing.
Right.
And that protection only lasts 1 year. So not 2 to 3. They actually said that once that booster comes at 12, the amount of protection is 1 year alone.
Wow, because a study 5 years ago, they found 2 to 3 years of protection.
But this is specific about the booster, so maybe the 2 to 3 is younger.
No, it was with the booster. But then recently 1 year.
This is literally 1 year, and 20% won't get any protection from it. And so the reason that we're seeing this, but then of course, what does it come down to? It goes, even though immunity wanes, increasing coverage rates in the community would help prevent pertussis outbreaks. So we have a 98.6% vaccination rate in these 2 schools. We have over 98% in LA County for pertussis, 96% for kindergartners in LA County. It's already past the quote unquote herd immunity model. And can I just say, the herd immunity, the 95%, is really only supposed to be about measles.
Right.
It's never been attributed. And now I've seen it 3 times this week. One about chickenpox, now one about pertussis, where they say it needs to be at that 95%. You're like, oh, wait a second. You're just taking this 95% for measles and you're just attributing it to every single disease that that we have vaccines for, which is dubious. That's a very dubious practice because it's not factual. Now, everybody is meant to believe that we need 95% coverage for all vaccines that are required in order for us to maintain, quote unquote, herd immunity. But how much higher could they get? I mean, 98.6, like how much higher could they actually get? And
but it's funny. I never see, almost never see a medical professional or the CDC use pertussis as a vaccine that we need herd immunity for, because all medical professionals know that vaccine doesn't give you herd immunity because it does not stop you from catching the disease and transmitting it to others in the first place. So I think it's mainly lay people that might try to claim.
In articles. Well, and by the way, the study about the year that you were, for immunity waning in a year is a Kaiser study.
Okay.
So I have a link to that that we can include. But again, it just comes back to the fact that we still need, so it's a well-recognized phenomenon, waning immunity. However, they come back to we still need to focus on making sure people don't have exemptions.
Right.
And you're thinking it's such a small rate of people that have exemptions. Like in LA County, it's like, less than 1% of people that have, I think it's 0.7% that have medical exemptions.
Right.
And of course, there are no other exemptions anymore. Right. And so what would they want?
Well, and so I think the new study from Dr. Cherry that literally shows this vaccine is going to make you more susceptible, and we have no way to fix that. People can start using that and showing your legislators when they try to pass mandatory vaccination laws. Everywhere where this is happening, Oregon, Washington, and the other states, we'll put a link to the study, print it up and show that study to your legislator that the vaccine they are mandating or thinking about mandating, number one, the disease is mutating. The vaccine is helping to trigger that mutation, according to theories. And now it's going to actually make things worse for you the rest of your life. You want to mandate that as a legislator?
And it does say in the same article, under California law, children must receive all of their doses of whooping cough vaccine to be allowed to attend school. Right. And again, this pertussis is the most amount of doses of any vaccine that you will need to attend school. You're going to have 6 doses of this by the time that you're 12. So this is the most frequent vaccine that you would get. And it's so frequent because it doesn't work very well. And yet they're mandating and removing exemptions for this. You would need all 6 doses of something that doesn't work in order to just have your right to get an education. I mean, outside of the fact that this new study is showing, it inhibits your immune protection from this later in life, outside of that, we just know that the coverage has never been good for this acellular vaccine. And I want to clarify that in this LA Times article, they mention how DTP was the original vaccine that changed out in 1997. But they say the reason it was changed is because children were getting fevers. That's all they said.
Yes, yeah.
And we know that is not true. And I wrote that in my post. The reason they changed it was because of brain damage, actual brain damage. We're not talking about, they got a little red at the soreness at the injection site and a little bit of a fever. This was much more serious than that. And when it comes down to, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, when you reformulate things and have to, completely create something new or adjust what you have, nobody is going to be doing that for nothing. And, recently, Robert Kennedy Jr. was talking in Connecticut, and he was talking about the hepatitis B vaccine. And it was so interesting because it used to have thimerosal, and that was in 2001. And then there was a study that showed out of 400,000 kids, you had an 11.3 times relative risk increase if you had the hepatitis B vaccine with thimerosal in the first 60 days of life.
Increase of what?
Sorry, for an autism diagnosis.
Okay, right. Yeah.
So do you remember what else happened in 2001? That's when they started taking out thimerosal in vaccines.
Right.
But they didn't do it because thimerosal is dangerous. They only did it because they were hearing a few parents were upset. And we know they would never reformulate something and change their entire schedule unless they knew exactly what kind of damage was being done.
Right. Well, there's 2 things I want to say about that, and I don't know, maybe we just change this. We just change this episode to a whooping cough update episode. But 2 things are very very interesting. And and I forgot one of them. So I'll tell you the second one and we'll come back. So people always hear about the old whole cell vaccine causing lots of brain damage. And so they took it off the market and changed it to acellular. Well, the medical community has now backpedaled and said none of that really happened. Oh, they're literally saying none of that brain damage ever happened to all these babies, because what they did is they're blaming it on a genetic disorder called Dravet syndrome or Dravet syndrome. I don't know if it's French or not, but Dravet. Basically what's happened is some researchers found some of the case files of some of these vaccine-injured kids, and they found that on genetic evaluations, these kids had Dravet syndrome. And Dravet syndrome is something where you were born and you seem like maybe you're fairly healthy, and then sometime during your infancy you develop severe seizures, brain degeneration, you become very, very sick and developmentally disabled. And this happens to I guess every child who has Dravet syndrome. And so what they found is a few dozen of those, thousands of people who had brain damage from the old whole cell pertussis vaccine. They found a few dozen who had Dravet syndrome. And so then they did all kinds of fancy math and played with a bunch of numbers and somehow extrapolated all this information to find that, hey, we are now going to claim that all the kids who had brain damage from the whole cell pertussis vaccine, they all had Dravet syndrome. All, tens of thousands of them or hundreds of thousands of them all had this this super rare genetic disorder, and they all would have had brain damage anyway. So getting the whole cell pertussis vaccine just sped it up. It just made the brain damage happen earlier. And it would have happened anyway. So the whole cell pertussis vaccine probably was okay for everyone as long as you didn't have Dravet syndrome. That's what they are literally saying now.
But they said that it arrives in infancy. How much earlier would the vaccine make you get it if you got it in infancy anyway? That doesn't make any sense. Because you're
right, I don't know. Well, you get brain damage at 2 months from the first dose instead of 4 months or 6 months. Yeah. So it's total bull.
Yeah.
The research is just totally bogus. I've read the research, but the reason I bring this up is the audience. If you are talking to a medical professional, you talk about whole cell vaccine, you might hear this come up. You might hear them now deny that ever even happened because so-and-so doctor at some medical institution proved that they all had Dravet syndrome. So you can actually do some of this research on your own if you want to look at it and be ready to counter that argument that no, the vast majority, 99% of these tens of thousands of kids did not have Dravet syndrome, because you can't go back and do genetic analyses on all these kids because they're long gone.
And one thing that I think we'll do a separate episode on that I really love and would totally encourage everyone to look at is there is a documentary in 1982 called DPT Vaccine Roulette, and it's on YouTube. Yeah. You can find it. So it's kind of like a Dateline type of 45-minute thing, and it is literally the discussion of how DPT caused brain damage, and it shows many adult, a high teenager and early adult age individuals that were completely damaged, brain damaged, and the parents that were talking out about how they were being silenced and how everybody's telling them it's not true. And I mean, this thing was happening in 1982. There's a member of the FDA talking on there.
Yeah, Barbara Lowe Fisher is in there.
Is she?
It's Barbara Lowe with brown hair, dark brown hair. It looks.
The first time I saw this blew my mind because I was thinking to myself. In fact, I think I texted you a bunch of times, oh my God, they just said this. Can you believe he just said this? Because this is a couple years ago. Because this story is just as true today for what's happening. Yes. And in 1982, they were aware of these things, and here we are. 35 years later, and how many children or adults have been injured consistently because they refuse to tell the truth, because they refuse to acknowledge it's happening. It's better for them to cover up the fact that there is any potential risk, keep the lie going. And I was thinking, gosh, I was 4 years old at the time that documentary came out, and here it was. There were already 18-year-old, 17-year-old kids that had been brain damaged by this particular vaccine, and they were being told they were crazy. The parents were being told this is not true. The FDA representative is literally saying, if we told parents what was the side effects were, you would never get the vaccine.
Exactly.
And he said those exact words on there. So look it up on YouTube. It's called, you can even type in, I just looked, DPT documentary. And then, in the 90s, Katie Couric covered something that I shared on my Facebook that was also talking about DPT and brain damage and how all of these mothers and parents were coming together to meet because they felt completely ostracized and they were discarded. The doctors told them, there's no connection. Nobody wanted to help them find a solution. And it's the same thing now. Hysterical mothers, just hysterical mothers. And so totally check out this documentary because there are so many examples here that verify DPT was absolutely causing brain damage. Right. And it wasn't just doing that in the United States. This was happening all over the world because in the UK, there was a big group of people that were having issues with the DPT vaccine. I was just
what's really sad is you might say, well, that's okay. It's not okay, but you might say that doesn't apply to us now in the United States because we don't use that vaccine anymore. They're using the whole cell pertussis vaccine all over the Pacific Island nations, a lot of the impoverished Pacific Island nations, because they have problems with whooping cough there. They're now using this vaccine all over those islands. And then think of how many kids are being brain damaged. And I guess we can mention that study that someone actually studied one of the, and they're using this in some of the African nations and some of the Asian countries as well. They actually studied, I forget which country it was, and this was recent research, a doctor went to that country and examined, examined like the whole childhood population and found the kids who got the new whole cell pertussis vaccine were 5 times more likely to die.
It was in Africa.
Right, during their childhood compared to the kids who did not get the new whole cell pertussis vaccine. The whole cell pertussis vaccine was at a 5-fold increase in mortality rates during childhood. So we know that vaccine is doing something. But you think this is not going to apply to the U.S.? Guess again. It is going to apply because they're having such a bad problem with whooping cough, they're going to, number one, either try to bring back the whole cell vaccine and try to give everybody like one dose. Like I bet they're going to try to give the 18-month-old and the 5-year-olds like the whole cell booster. Maybe not the new babies, give the acellular to the young babies, but then give the whole cell booster to the 18-month and 5-year-olds. They're going to try to bring that back. I bet you $20. But if they don't try to bring that back, this is what I forgot, from 5 minutes ago. All this CDC research on genetics, and they're figuring out what is the new genetics and the mutated genetics of the whooping cough germs. What they're going to use that information for is to make new vaccines. They're not just going to try to tweak the current vaccine. They have to totally remake an entire whooping cough vaccine. And what's scary is they're in a hurry. They're in a hurry to get it done, get it made, tested, fast-tracked, approved. And what do you think is going to go wrong with that process?
Lack of safety studies.
Yes, I'm very concerned.
But listen to this though. So maybe what you're saying, if they do try to bring back a whole cell version, new whole cell version, maybe that is why there is a campaign to discredit the fact that the whole cell version ever caused problems in the past.
Exactly.
So maybe that narrative of the whole cell DPT is dangerous. Now there's a PR campaign to attack that idea so that we want to make that seem like that's actually not true. They just had a genetic condition. So don't worry. Maybe all of that, again, is a foundation.
Yes.
Lay the foundation for the public to shift their opinion on something. They don't feel afraid of it. And oh, hey guys, guess what? We just happened to invent and create this new whole cell version. And we're going to start giving that to your kids, and it's going to be mandatory for your school entry. But remember all those debunked theories of the fact that it caused brain damage. It's not really true. That was something, maybe that's all connected. Again, the way that I've seen this work is it's just little by little. Every little thing adds on top of every little thing slowly and meticulously to shape public opinion on something. It's not just overnight. This stuff takes sometimes 10, 15 years. And if you step back and objectively look, you can go, oh, that's why they did that.
Right.
That's why they did that. And then all of a sudden the public's like, yeah, no, I'm totally fine with DTP. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
The doctors, they said it wasn't dangerous after all.
Yeah, and plus they're using it in Fiji. So, why can't we use it here?
It's totally safe and
exactly.
effective.
Yeah, well, it's what's funny is, that was our intro to today's episode. So we're going to actually have to make this an episode because that's already been like 40 minutes,
Okay.
I think so. So that was
thanks for joining us.
I
Wait,
know.
let's say before we stop, let's just say congratulations to the Vaccine Conversation podcast because we went over 100,000 downloads, you guys.
Yes.
We hit the 100,000 mark and are 10,000 over that by now, maybe 15,000 over that by now. We are on par to get 50,000 downloads just this month, just for March. That is just so amazing.
Yeah, and I love how we're growing. Like, there was November a little bit, then December. Every month we're not quite doubling, but we're kind of getting close to doubling our downloads every single month. And I love looking back and seeing, you can see how many downloads of the first episode happened like just this month. And the second episode, you can kind of see there's actually more downloads of our first episode this month than there were when we started.
And I love how people go back. So somebody will share maybe a current episode or they'll tell them about the podcast. And I get a lot of healthcare practitioners messaging me like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I really love what you guys are doing. I recommend this podcast to all my patients. I recommend this podcast to my clients, whatever. And so usually when somebody gets recommended to it, they go back and listen to all of them.
Yeah.
And so it's really great to see that there's some value in everything that we've already done because it's creating a body of work that people can use. And a lot of times I'll be able to reference somebody, oh, I had a question about this. Oh, check out episode 6. Check out episode 10. It's nice that it's like a documented source of content so that we have it all in one place. But 100,000, that's pretty cool. So we can just celebrate that one a little bit.
Yeah, so thanks, you guys. We really appreciate it.
Oh, and you know what? Can I say something?
No.
Can I say something? Will you allow me to speak, Dr. Bob?
Yeah, the audience is like, no, don't end the episode yet. No, keep talking.
No, please. I can't wait 3 more days.
Only if you do it in your Southern England accent.
Oh, God. So, which episode was that, by the way?
I don't know. That was, I just listened to that.
You did?
So.
Oh my God. Did anybody else?
No,
think
that's
that
in
was funny?
today's episode.
Oh, it is? Is it really? Please tell me if anybody thought that was
No, it was
funny.
in Meninja Cockle. That's in next week's episode.
Okay, it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to say anything. All right, well, by the time this airs, it will already have aired. So let me know if you thought that was funny. But what I was going to say is, again, we are creators of Immunity Education Group, which is a nonprofit. So we do not get paid for this at all. But I am going to do my first plug for donations because, one, I have to pay my babysitter and she watches my kids on these days when I come to podcast, and that comes out of our donations because we don't get paid for it, but the cost of that, the cost of our sound engineer, there are some things that we pay. And I get so many messages about like, how can we help? What can we do? And there's really nothing that goes to us, but it would be awesome if you feel like you have gained value from this, if you feel like you want us to continue doing it. I would love that you guys could cover my babysitter costs to come do this. We can cover the sound engineer, and we can allow for more things, and we can allow for maybe renting a space to do an evening in Orange County that's a live podcast experience. And so that'll give us a little bit of that time because we don't have anything. This is literally just us. And so, I hate when people always advertise themselves or ask for donations. I'm really against that. But I will say, if you feel inspired or you feel moved to do so because you've really enjoyed, the 30 episodes we've done so far and you really want us to keep doing this, I would personally really love that because I know that we do have administration costs that come out, and at some point there's not going to be anything left in there. And so we want to just be able to keep the option open. We want to keep creating content for you. And so this is my first and probably not my last, but it'll be a while again before I say this. There's a donate button on IEG's website, so immunityed.org. If you feel inclined to do so, we appreciate you anyway. We appreciate the support and the listeners anyway, but that would be awesome to make things a little bit easier for us to continue doing this. So I'm the one that keeps the books, keeps the finances. I got to do the taxes soon. They're due in May. But we
we have a good amount of money in there right now. I'll say, like, to cover the cost of this for quite a while. But you're right. Eventually, that would run out.
Because I really want to do a live.
Yeah.
A lot, and we're going to probably, it costs usually a couple $100 to rent out a place for the evening to have a couple hours, and we can have a big space that holds, 300-400 people, and we can have an event, like an actual event. And those are, we don't want to have to ask other people to donate their money and do that stuff. We would love to be able to cover those charges for our own events, but it would be amazing if that came from donations.
But it was always very important to me that you and I basically, our time is free. We donate our time. You and I have never, personally accepted any of our donated money.
Not even a penny.
Right. Not even a penny. So we have, we even pay for our own Starbucks when we meet at Starbucks. But yeah, we do. We just have the little bit of cost, the for the sound engineer, like you said, and I
well, plus sponsoring
to pay for childcare for for babysitting, because that's important. I didn't want this to cost us any money. I didn't want you to have to pay a babysitter to come and donate your time. So I was very very happy to have the donated money cover that. But yeah, we never want to take any of this donated money for our time or for our own.
Well, we have sponsored posts too on Facebook that we like to do if they allow for that
you
to
know what?
happen.
They're not going to let us sponsor Facebook posts anymore. No, I haven't tried.
Did you try? Let's try and see.
We should try one. Yeah. But anyway,
we're signing off. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks.
Love ya. Bye. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I'm such a geek.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.